Hi there, I'm Brittany from By Brittany Goldwyn. I post videos about plants and projects, and today we are doing a project with a plant nexus. We are going to be using some salt and some rosemary and lavender that I just dried from my garden to make a homemade salt scrub. So first we're gonna walk through the ingredients, why I chose what I chose, then we'll walk through how to mix them together, and we'll wrap up with how to store the salt scrub. Let's get started. So the first ingredient you'll be working with is obviously salt for a salt scrub. I like to go to the store and get whatever the store brand salt I can find in a coarse mixture and a fine mixture. I like to mix these two together because I find if I use all coarse salt, it's a little bit too harsh on my skin. And if I use only fine crystals, it doesn't have enough like exfoliating properties to it. Now, you don't have to be picky and get expensive salt or anything like that. I favor the cheap store brand stuff just because I mostly like the salt for its exfoliation properties and not necessarily the benefits that are derived from the quality of the salt itself. Next up, you'll want some sort of carrier oil. So I have a jojoba oil here, and I have a sweet almond oil as well. There are a number of things you can use for this, and I am not picky about brands. I also have a vitamin E oil that I got from Trader Joe's that I keep on hand all winter to mix in with lotions and whatnot. You could use something like that, but just don't use an essential oil for this step because you're going to be using a lot of it. Now, in addition to the carrier oil, I really recommend using this, a coconut oil. Now, I recommend using a coconut oil. It can be any type of coconut oil. This is just a Wegmans store brand. I like using it because, as you can see, coconut oil is solid at room temperature. You can dump it upside down. It's not coming out like the other oils. And I like using the coconut oil that's solid at room temperature because when you're storing the salt, it gives it a nice consistency, and then you scoop it up with your fingers and rub it on your skin, and your body temperature itself will warm up the coconut oil enough to begin melting it. And I just find it's a really, really perfect consistency mixing these two types of oils for a salt scrub. Now, the next two things are totally optional, but I recommend adding at least one of them in to give yourself a nice scent or some additional exfoliating properties. The first of these two things is essential oils. So I have a lavender essential oil and a eucalyptus essential oil that I've had these for like 2 years. I usually, when I take a salt bath, I'll just put a couple little drops in. I love the way it smells. I am not picky about brands of these. I use them mostly for their scent. And again, I love lavender, eucalyptus, rosemary, mint, all those types of relaxing scents. And then in addition to this essential oils, I've dried a bunch of rosemary and lavender from my garden. I have videos about how to dry lavender and rosemary sprigs without a dehydrator. Now, I've dried these in advance, and when you dry your herbs, no matter what method you choose, you're going to dilute some of that scent that the herbs are known for. And that's because a lot of that scent comes from the oils in the herb's leaves and its flowers sometimes. So when you dry it, you're taking away some of that scent. So when I mix in some ground up herbs for the additional exfoliation properties, I like to add in a drop or two of essential oil just to give a little bit of that scent back so that I feel like I'm taking a nice relaxing spa shower. And then of course you will need something to mix it in, something to mix it with. Any spoon works. A 1 cup measuring cup and a 1 tablespoon. Now, after you've made a bunch of salt scrubs, you will get a feel for exactly how much oil and salt you like in your scrubs, and you'll just start dumping them into a bowl and mixing them up. That's pretty much what I do now, but I'm using these measuring cups now to give you an idea of how much oil you may want to start with while you're getting a feel for the consistency you want your salt scrub to be. All right, we'll get started by measuring out the salt first. And I mentioned I like to start with a roughly 50-50 mix of the coarse crystals, which you can see are a little bit bigger, and then some fine crystals. And I just find that these are a really nice mix of harsher exfoliation without being too harsh, and a little bit of the finer salt kind of evening things out. So I have 1 cup. I'm gonna go ahead and dump that in. Now, I like to add the carrier oil next because, as I mentioned, the carrier oils do not need any sort of melting. They are liquid already. So I am going to pour in 2 tablespoons of the carrier oil. Okay. Now, since this spoon is already all oily, I'm just gonna go ahead and start mixing this up. I'll give you an idea of the consistency that 1 cup of salt and 2 tablespoons of carrier oil gives you. So you still have a pretty nice, light and fluffy mixture here, but I generally like to do my salt scrubs very oily. I love a super oily salt scrub in the fall, winter, and early spring when my skin is super dry. I just find that it makes it so much easier to stay moisturized because once I get out of the shower, I'm just not gonna take the time to do lotion. I don't know if you guys are anything like me, then you might be similar. Now for the coconut oil, I mentioned it is still in its solid state here. I've not melted it yet, so what I'm going to do is just scoop out a rough approximation of what I think 2 tablespoons would be here. You can see it's pretty easy. It kind of looks like bacon grease here. And then I'm going to pop this in the microwave for about 10-15 seconds to see if I can get it melted enough that I can get it to be in its completely liquid form. Okay, I am back from the microwave. It took me about 60 seconds to melt that amount of coconut oil, and as you can see, it is completely liquefied here and ready to be easily mixed in. So all I'm gonna do is dump it in, try and get all of the excess out here, and set it aside, and then mix that up really well as well. Now, you can't really tell now because the coconut oil has been warmed up and it is in its liquid form, but once it cools down a bit, it will create a really nice consistency with the salt scrub that I think you'll really enjoy when you're actually using it and letting it literally melt onto your skin. Now at this point, it's a good idea to take a little bit of the salt scrub and rub it on your hand to see if you like the oily consistency of it. If you think it's still not oily enough for you, especially depending on the time of year, you can add in a little bit more of the carrier oil or the coconut oil. Keep in mind, if you add in too much, then you'll need to add in a little bit more salt to balance things out. So start with just a little bit, mix it in, and test it out. Otherwise, we're ready to add in our optional ingredients now. Now it's time to add in our fun extras. As I mentioned, I love, love, love the smell of lavender. So I'm just going to do a drop or 2 of lavender essential oil in this. Go ahead and stir it up really quickly, just a bit. And then I'm going to take this pre-dried mixture of lavender and rosemary from my garden. I've already dried this completely and crushed it up, and I'm going to stir this in. Now this is obviously optional and it makes your shower a little messy, but I do not really care because it's from my garden and I love the way it smells and I love the little bit of extra exfoliation that it gives you in addition to the salt. It smells so good. That is a look at the finished salt scrub. Just give you an idea of the consistency here. Definitely get a lot of oil. I did add in a little bit of extra oil, carrier and coconut oil, because I like it heavier in the winter. Now let's talk about storing your salt scrub. So I know that when I'm making homemade things like salt scrubs, I'm not making them in a sterile environment. So I like to try and make only what I think I will use over the next couple weeks, month tops. I store them in containers about this big. I like to use upcycled plastic containers because I don't like to use glass in the shower for obvious reasons, especially with slippery hands. You don't want to drop that and break it in your shower. This is an old Truvia canister, the fake sugar, and we use this in the kitchen, and I saw this container and thought that's a perfect container for bath salts. So I've just been washing and reusing this Truvia container for my homemade bath salts for about, I don't even remember how long now, but it's the perfect size for a good batch that I know I'll be able to use it all in a couple weeks if I use it with every shower, and it has a lid that screws on tight and pops open to use in the shower. All right, so I've just finished filling up my container of my DIY salt scrub and we're ready to go. If you guys like content like this, the intersection between projects and gardening and plants, definitely like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does go a long way in helping our content be seen by more people. And if you have any questions about making your own salt scrubs at home, I've been doing it for years and years and years. It's so much fun, it's cheap, it's easy. Stop buying salt scrub when you can make your own at home. With things from your garden, you can make them as hard or as easy as you want to make them. Until next time, happy planting.